culling is very, very important in a season that we're looking down the barrel of, but it must be tough to work out which ones to get rid of when they're healthy.
It can be, Rob. I guess what's invoked me to think about talking about this today is probably our friends in the small acreages, lifestyle block farmers. And unfortunately we've seen just quite a few issues with, in my opinion, breeding stock that probably shouldn't have been bred through this season. That's resulted in a number of ewes struggling to maintain body condition through a lactation, and a resulting very high level of metabolic disease. And some of these problems have been relatively simple. When we look at these animals, you know, some of them are totally broken in the mouth, have no teeth left at all, and probably should have been on the cull list, if not last season, even the season before. And so I guess it brings about an important aspect of responsibility in regard to welfare, and sometimes, you know, getting rid of these animals is a real positive for welfare. And obviously when we've got restriction on resources and feed in particular, I mean, it makes very little sense to carry through animals that aren't just going to be efficient in producing what you want to, and that's whether you're a lifestyle block farmer or a commercial farmer for that matter.
But if you only own 20, it's pretty tempting to get as many out of them as you can, I guess.
But I would suggest maybe it's more tempting to maybe even run a little replacement system where you're going to have some younger, better health status animals that are breeding anyway. So dentition, obviously we've just mentioned, and that's a real clanger when it comes to identifying animals that should be culled and taken out of the flock. So this is the time of year to be thinking about that. On top of that, we've pretty much finished lambing, and we should be looking at problematic issues, animals that have perhaps had a bout of mastitis and have only got one titters or no titters. Obviously sheep with only one functional half of another, they're going to be less efficient at feeding lambs, particularly multiparous. If we've got twins and triplets fighting for the same nutrition, then that's an obvious reason to look at putting them on the cull list as well. The old chronic limpers, the old chronic lameness issues, not only is it important from a welfare perspective and the individual animal struggling to maintain condition, burning up a lot of energy hobbling around, but a lot of these lameness issues, when we're talking about foot rot and things like that, very contagious, very infectious, and are just a chronic source of ongoing shedding bacteria and bugs around the environment. So getting rid of them has benefits not only for the welfare of that animal, but also for the welfare of the whole flock in general.
So foot rot's still a major problem? Because I thought we'd got on top of it a bit.
We have on the main part, but we still do see problems, and I still see some issues with hobbling sheep, even on the flat here. And it's, yeah, well drained areas like Canterbury are typically less of a problem, but we still are seeing some issues. Yeah.
And of course then you've got abscess and you've got mud between the toes and scald and...
Exactly. Scald generally is a prerequisite to foot rot anyway. So yeah, it's I think these real chronic limpers that we just can't get on top of, definitely a good advertisement to say goodbye. Exactly. I guess the other very, very obvious thing is if we've had issues with birthing and there's been a fair bit of trauma in delivering lambs, and especially those cases that have had ongoing problems after such assistance, we might have some pathology or disease in the uterine tract, infections and things like that. Those animals are much less likely to get back in calf or in lamb. And so these are things to think about. Maybe more of a problem when we're talking about cattle farming than sheep farming, but still something to be borne in mind. There can be a number of other issues, and any ewes that have struggled to make condition through the prior pregnancy for various reasons, it could be a good reason to start thinking about quitting them as well. Obviously the draw on that animal through a lactation is going to be significant, and if they've gone into that lactation under condition and you're expecting them to feed some lambs, then get some condition back, flush them properly to get them back in lamb, that can be a struggle, and maybe it's easier to mark those animals for cull and actually start with a better class of animal for breeding next year.
Genetic disease?
Yeah, I guess we should talk about it. There's a number of them out there that we need to be aware of. Perhaps the most common that we see is entropion, which is the infolding of the eyelid in the lamb, and often we still see these little lambs brought in with very, very sore eyes in the first week or two of life, ulcers on their corneas, and the classic for that is this disease called entropion, where the lower eyelid in particular is folded in on itself. It's too big, and the hair or fur on the lower lid is rubbing directly on the eye. It's genetic. Obviously it involves input from both the ram and the ewe, but that may well be an indication to look at altering genetics as far as either ram or ewe is concerned, to avoid that. There are some much more lethal genetic diseases, and obviously the importance comes in getting that diagnosed correctly. But if there are some weird issues, anatomical issues or problems creeping up, and you're getting a number of lambs affected, very important in those instances to get a veterinarian involved. If it is a genetic problem, getting the diagnosis nailed is the first priority, and then of course we can look at altering the breeding management and avoiding these problems coming up, working out who's carrying which trait and whether it's a dominant recessive genetic disease. All these more technical factors that probably are best discussed with the veterinarian, dependent on the diagnosis itself.
And very briefly, if you have an abortion in a herd or flock, should you move them on?
It's a hard one. Sometimes if we've had an abortion storm, because of the propensity for infectious diseases and causing these, immunity for survivors can be very long-standing. So sometimes those animals, as long as things have been managed properly, can be very valuable for the future of the farm involved, because we may have very long lasting immunity and their susceptibility to future problems may be very minimal indeed if they've already gone through an abortion storm.